Hello, and welcome back to our next panel, HEMS, Future Concept or Current Solution. We do have three panelists for this one, having a little bit of technical difficulty, so we will wait for the other two to join remotely. That will be Ricardo Lopez, Research Manager at LCP Delta, and Karl Villanueva, co-founder of Ostrom. But right now, joining me is gridX's own CGO and Managing Director, Tim Steinmetz. Tim, after completing his degree in industrial engineering at the Technical University of Berlin, he gained experience in the energy sector at Engie and Antelios, among others. He joined gridX's management team in January of last year and is responsible for the growth and operations department. So, Tim, welcome.
Thanks, Georgia.
And we will dive right in, although I believe Karl is just about to join. There is Karl.
Hi, Karl.
Welcome, Karl. Let me just introduce you then to the panel real quick. So you are the co-founder and CMO/CPO of Ostrom. He is dedicated to creating fair, smart, and green energy solutions using NLP and machine learning to optimize consumer energy use. With over 12 years in data science, product management, and marketing, he previously founded Kidlat.io and held roles at Smartly.io and HelloFresh, focusing on AI-driven growth and customer acquisition. So thank you for joining. Glad you could make it. So to start, Tim, how would you define home energy management systems in today's context?
In today's context, so to keep it maybe simple and short, as the word says, actually, home energy management is something which manages the energy flows in your home. And in the end, I would separate that in different areas. So it's first about connecting different assets which produce, which save or consume energy in your home. So really making these assets interacting with each other and talking to each other. That's a very important component. And then secondly, make sure, at least with most of the HEMS, that these assets are not just physically on-site talking to each other, but also manageable from the outside. So bringing data, bringing the connection to the cloud. Second and third, from my point of view, enable that a user, the homeowner or the renter, can steer these assets according to the most economical or environmental beneficial way, ideally in an automated way. But yeah, that's for me home energy management. It enables a lot. It's a kind of spider in net, maybe, or a big puzzle piece which connects to other puzzle pieces like other services, tariffs, etc. So a very powerful tool, I would say.
And then going off of the title of this panel, would you say HEMS is already a mainstream solution, or is it still evolving as a future concept?
I would say that's a tricky question for me personally, because as you also introduced me, I'm active in the energy space, HEMS space, VPP, so virtual power plant space, for almost 15 years now. So you could assume, or you should maybe even assume, that it's already a mainstream solution. But to be honest, I would rather say it's not yet. So if you look at the market, also at gridX, for example, it's a proven market. So the market is there. We have a proven solution as gridX. We have many assets connected to our platform. So that's already showing that it's not just a concept, right? So it's not in the beginning, not just starting. And there are also many other players in the field of home energy management systems which have other approaches like gridX. So there's not only one way to do it. It's a variation, I would say, which is also good. More and more players pop up. So yeah, as said, I think it's more than in the beginning. And if we look at studies or forecasts, I think this underlines that there's so much more to come. So I think the company where Ricardo is also working in, LCP Delta. They are doing very often very good studies. And they say, and Ricardo, correct me please, but if you look until 2030, the market volume of HEMS solutions should almost fivefold. So this already shows that mainstream is really coming, mass market is coming, but we're not there yet. Also if you look, for example, from our just day-to-day business, very basically speaking, we're also getting requests from interested parties, which we haven't had on our radar so far, and which we weren't focusing on, which also shows that there are new customer groups, new parties entering the market, so to speak. So all of these are signs for me that it goes towards mainstream and mass market, but not there yet.
Okay. And then, Karl and Ricardo, welcome. Ricardo, glad you could make it. To turn that question to both of you as well, do you see HEMS as already being a mainstream solution, or is it still evolving as a future concept?
I think depends on like how we define it. So like I don't know, I moved all my lights to like this like Philips Hue lights like maybe like 8 years ago. Is that like part of HEMS already? If so, then like you can argue that it's a bit more mainstream. But if you look at like the large energy consumers, solar, EV, battery, heat pumps, then we might say that like we're still quite way off, considering the number of like gas powered alternatives out there. I think quickly from our side, what we see is kind of a big driver, and this is what we see a lot at Ostrom as well, is that the smart meters and the dynamic tariffs definitely do help, because then people have a much larger financial incentive to say, hey, the way I always explain it is maybe I used to spend 2,000 euros a year going to the gas station and pumping gas in my car. All of a sudden, I have an EV. That's 2,000 euros. I'm not pumping gas in my car. That's 2,000 euros I'm using to charge my car. And then, people drive to different gas stations or drive, gas up during certain times when the price is low. So people are already kind of doing it manually, if you think about it. And what we say is that, like, well, imagine right now you just plug it at your home. Whenever the price is low, you pay that price. So I think that these are kind of like the adoptions that we've seen. But yeah, in Germany in particular, smart meters are really kind of like the basis point, right? Because you can't improve what you can't measure. Like all of us who work in companies know that. But for the consumer, if you need to go to your basement every time you need to do some optimization and have no tools to work on it, then you're just not going to be part of this HEMS solution.
Mm. And Ricardo, would you have any thoughts to add?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, in my view, I think basically is in our definition as well is for me we're still not there for mass market. But for me, what I would like to highlight from the question you asked is it evolving? Yes, and it's rapidly evolving. Part of the research we publish like a bit of a framework when we follow key players such as gridX and many others like there, and we make this kind of joke or so like, okay, by the moment we publish it, it's already outdated because it's very dynamic, it's evolving super fast, but we're still not there in my opinion into in the mass market. But we are there, and we, as mentioned as well in our scenarios where we forecast our deployment is rapidly going, is accelerating fast. Companies are innovating a lot. There's a big need there. So yeah, definitely. I feel we're in the right direction with many things that we still need to be taken. But yeah.
And then Karl, in your opinion, what are the key drivers pushing the adoption of HEMS in households today?
Yeah, I think what we've seen so far is that the larger the consumption is, the more people realize that that's kind of useful. So when you talk about HEMS and like saving energy, like the joke we always say is kind of like, imagine I'm reading. I don't want my Philips Hue light turned off because the energy price is a bit like 5 cents more expensive. That's not what it is for, right? Like some devices you just want to use at a certain time. But some devices have that flexibility. So like everyone we all say is like with electric vehicles, right? So what we see is that once a person switches to an EV, that drives up kind of like, oh, now I'm kind of automating this thing. What else is there? So it's kind of like a gateway product into HEMS. So this is kind of what we've seen a lot. So I think another one we see is like a split between homeowners and renters. Germany or the DACH countries in particular, very kind of like more renter friendly. So if it's not your own place, you're not necessarily making the investments to kind of like optimize your house. You might not be installing smart thermostats as willingly or as easily. Whereas, yeah, if it is your house, then you are going to optimize a lot more. So I think, yeah, every time I would say like just broadly, like the heat pumps, the EVs, and anything with smart meters for us, these are the drivers we've seen so far.
Okay. And then, Ricardo, can you share some examples of successful HEMS applications and what made them successful?
Sure. I think that's I think for me, there's different type of what a HEM application can be successful, right? And for me, I would like to get a little bit step back. For me, a HEM solution has to be customer focused. We have to put the customer in front of this, and that's what we keep accelerating the deployment of HEM, right? So a good example of a good application is we did a customer research, part of the research we do at LCP Delta just in 2023, late 2023, and we were targeting HEM customers and non-HEM customers, right? And it was a moment where a lot of the people were struggling more with increasing prices in the energy consumption at home, in the energy bills, and it was having a strong impact in everyday life of consumers, right? And then when we asked them how did they feel, or if they felt any financial impact, negative impact, or how strong was the negative impact in their bills last year, we saw how HEM customers were. They were like maybe 40% said like they had a negative impact. The other one said like maybe much less or little impact compared to non-HEM customers. The majority said like, yeah, my bill just went crazy. So for me, that's a clear example of how successful a HEM system can be. Like that feeling and also that good impact in the energy efficiency and reflected in the bills with customers. At the end of the day, the purpose of this is to have more an optimized use of the energy. But yeah.
Okay. And then, Tim, what would you say are the key technical challenges in integrating HEMS with renewable energy sources like solar panels, home batteries, and the like?
Yeah. So tech challenges, I think there are a lot. So we could, I think, spend the whole session on that, but also look at our history. But to pick out a couple of important things to mention, to cluster it a little bit, I would probably separate it towards the hardware assets which are installed. There are challenges. So I mentioned at the beginning, very often they speak different languages, right? So they're not able to communicate properly, and they don't know what the other asset is doing in the household because it's from another manufacturer, basically, who talks a different language. So this can be solved by HEMS via translating the different languages and make them speak. If you look at the use cases which are bringing value to the end customer, there we see also challenges from the manufacturer side. So more sophisticated use cases like frequency curtailment reserve, or, for example, steering the assets based on time of use tariffs, or even simpler ones like phase switching in the household with a wall box. There we see many, even the big and powerful manufacturers which don't have the products ready for this. So the capabilities are not there yet sometimes. And I think via HEMS providers, manufacturers, and also going to the field and see it live, we discover these challenges and also need to work closely with the manufacturers on these challenges to solve it for the future. So no offense, but it's definitely work to do. And also one of our objectives in our recently launched a Ready for gridX initiative to make this easier for everybody. Then Karl, I think, mentioned also the smart meter rollout, for example, in Germany. That's a huge challenge because it avoids faster adoption, basically, of HEMS in combination with dynamic tariffs or other flexibility marketing use cases. So that's a big one, needs to be solved as soon as possible, and we are talking about that since ages, more than a decade, basically. And then I would say, last but not least, the HEMS system itself is also, I would say, from a tech perspective, quite challenging to set up, because in the end, with the whole energy transition, we have millions of decentralized assets in the field. And so far, many of these assets are not connected, are kind of stupid and very analog on the specific location. But the power grid and also the markets, they need liquidity and they need steerability to really keep the energy system affordable and also keep the lights on physically. So in the end, you need to have HEMS systems which are able to connect millions of these decentralized assets and make that in a scalable and also highly secure way. And that's something which is really, from a technical perspective, really a challenge. So you need to invest heavily into the infrastructure. You need to have a very good team who understand this and who has the skills to build this. So these are a couple of challenges from my point of view.
And then Ricardo, going off of that, irrespective of the challenges, how do you see HEMS being embedded in a homeowner's daily life 10 years from now? Do you see it as playing a more active or a passive role?
No, I think that's a good point. And I think, I'm sure like in 10 years' time, things will be much easier and more, as we'll pass many of the challenges. But putting that aside, I'm pretty sure HEMS will play a very key and active roles in the homes, right? I do see that this in 10 years' time, we'll be talking about how many assets are being integrated within the home. So there will be, Tim was mentioning all the millions of centralized assets there. They will be integrated, and I see HEMS being very, active, in accessing or taking advantage of different the values that were mentioned before. So not only relatively simple, let's say, with self-consumption optimization, but also more interactive with the dynamic pricing or even supporting the demand side, right? So I do see that even a great interaction with the grid and being very active while at the same time being super straightforward and simple for the homeowner. Yeah.
And then Tim, I think you were just touching upon this a little bit a second ago, but how can HEMS be made right now even more user-friendly for average homeowners?
Yeah, I think the tricky word is the average homeowners, right? So we are in this market already for a couple of years. So what we saw from the beginning were more the front runners, early adopters, I would say. And these personas, let's call it like this, or maybe even non-average homeowners, they love to understand everything. So they love to be in control. They love to understand control commands and decisions from energy management systems. They love to have very detailed insights, etc. And they love to even parameter their systems on a frequent basis. And that was good, I think, also to understand the personas. But that's, from my point of view, at least personally, far too complex for the mass market. So there, I think you need to bring in simplicity, as Ricardo also indicated, to the products to make it very, very easy. Because in the end, the solutions are becoming more complex. You're getting new use cases. You need to stack different use cases to get the most value out of the steerable assets, etc. So complexity is increasing, and you get more and more towards the mass market and towards the average homeowner. So simplicity, from my point of view, is really key. And that's just the core HEMS space, right? If you think from a homeowner perspective, I think it's also important to think on the areas which are maybe related to that. So that you integrate, for example, information from your EVs, from the automotive clouds, or that you integrate information from heating rods or heating pumps, that you don't only look at the electricity side, maybe also on the heating side, or that you get the information from your customer portal, from your utility, so electricity tariff provider. Even, I think Karl mentioned that 2 times, even smart home applications could be good for the average homeowner to have that in a unified view and app, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And actually, going off of that, Karl, what would you say is the current level of consumer awareness around HEMS right now? And can it be improved? Should it be improved? Oh, Karl, you might be on mute. No. Maybe at the moment, Karl, we still can't hear you. So maybe switch this question to Ricardo at the moment, just in case.
Yeah, sure. I think from my perspective, it links to the level of if we have reached mass market or not, right? Like I think right now customers that are already aware of a HEM solution, they tend to be a bit more energy aware, or a bit slightly a bit excited. They know there's something there they can improve their consumption at home or have a positive impact in the environment. So I feel like there's still a long way to go to increase this awareness in consumers, right? I think there were a few factors that accelerated this, perhaps the energy crisis, as I mentioned before, and some other advances in technology, right? But I think we're still a bit far from being completely aware of this. And how can improve? I think, we can. There's every player or every stakeholder can play a role, like governments pushing for this, for more incentives or solutions, awareness, education of the customer, companies creating a maybe more appealing solution that shows the benefits of having this to the customers, and like, okay, yeah, it makes sense, right? And they can go for this. But yeah, I think for me it will be compelling solutions, incentivize and educating of the benefits. Yeah.
What kind of incentives do you think governments could offer to incentivize a larger adoption of HEMS?
Yeah, I think we could take I guess we could take it from the perspective of direct or direct and indirect to HEM, right? I think there are so many in place, but we can even increase a lot of some incentives or type of regulations to keep accelerating deployment of these electrical assets at home, being called heat pumps, EV charge point, all these electricity assets that consume at home. So incentivize this deployment that directly, indirectly benefit them, because it's creating a need, right? So there's not one thing that it will fit everything. So that creates a need, and that creates awareness, what we're talking about, and so on. In terms of more direct HEM solution, I think they can, pursue more energy efficient incentives in the home that say, okay, basically you need to be efficient in that way, or reduce your consumption, or have that effect, and that directly impact the HEM implementation, right?
Mm-hmm. And then, Karl, do we have your sound back yet? Seems like no. I don't know if you want to try to leave and re-enter the call. I will go over to Tim at the moment.
Yeah, no worries.
So sorry, Karl.
Let's be pragmatic. No worries.
In your opinion, how do you balance the complexity of HEMS with the ease of use for consumers, especially those less tech savvy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually a little bit connecting to what we discussed before, right? So, in the end, the space where HEMS is in is complex, but from my point of view, one of the main goals of a HEMS should be to take this complexity away, right? So to make things which are complex way more simple for the user and for the customer. And there are many ways to do that. So you can do as much as possible automation so that the user doesn't need to control or doesn't need to parameter all the single assets separated from each other and on a frequent basis, but sets up, for example, some settings in the commissioning process in the beginning, and then the system itself takes care of the rest. If that's the case for multiple assets in a home, I think that saves time and also complexity. I think very easy ones are also to use in your product or in your user interface very simple visualizations or graphics of, for example, energy flows, or show very simple what you saved based on the HEMS. You can do that also in a benchmarking way. So compared to a certain period of time of your own savings in the past, or compared to average users, which are kind of comparable to you, to get a feeling how you're doing, right? So I think that's good for average homeowners and simplifying things. And then I think last but not least, it's also important to address the tech savvy audience as well. And there you could think of giving optional, for example, expert views, right? That more interested people who want to see more details, for example, or to who want to change more parameters frequently, that you give them as that optional the possibility to steer things themselves.
And then we do have a question from the audience. This might be either for you, Tim, or maybe Karl. How do you assess the opportunity or weakness in integrating HEMS hardware within inverter hardware?
Yeah. Shall I or Karl?
Karl, do we maybe have sound again?
Let's check.
Still no sound, unfortunately. So
yeah,
Tim, I'll give this to you right now.
No worries. So I try to interpret a little bit the question because I think you could answer that in different ways. So opportunities, I think that there's a big opportunity if you put or if you avoid additional HEMS hardware, if you put HEMS software on already existing or being newly installed inverter hardware. I think you can roll out HEMS much faster because you avoid that there's going any inverter hardware without a HEMS software on it into the field. So that's a good opportunity from my point of view. And I mean, in the end, it's also a question of definition, right? So many or almost every hardware manufacturer has a kind of HEMS software on the inverter. It's mostly very simple ones, and it's mostly interacting with the other products from their own hardware portfolio. So the interaction with other manufacturers is limited. That's maybe a weakness if the HEMS software is coming from the manufacturer. But on the opportunity side, you could also think of putting HEMS software from an independent player on inverter hardware to avoid that weakness I just talked about, right? So to play it more as a kind of ecosystem, like an ecosystem play, and with that be able to avoid additional hardware with an external gateway, for example. Use the rollout speed of the inverter hardware itself and avoid that you deploy inverters which are not connected well to other systems and to the cloud. And that could be a good combination. But then, of course, you need to have strong partnerships between the software players and the inverter producers. You also need to be aware of the capability. So, for example, computation power, processing power on the inverter itself, that there's from an processing power asset, but also from an architectural point of view, enough space and the right requirement set that you can do such kind of things. But in theory, that's possible, yeah.
Mhm. And then,
Does it work now?
yes, it does.
Okay.
Excellent.
Welcome back.
There were 4 Apple devices competing to be the microphone.
Oh, man.
All good.
Do you want to add to that audience question?
I think what we see though is just like customers have to think of it as an investment, right? So if I buy this hardware, how much does it take for me to kind of like recoup my costs? What capability do I get? So I think at least our approach has been more that like you have a pretty smart device you have with you all the time already, which is your phone, and from your phone you can control a lot. So this has been our approach. At least we think like customers will have different approaches on like how big their consumption is, how good their connectivity is, how much optimization they need as well. So I think for us there will be different grades. The only thing we see in general, like something that we espouse as well, is just like kind of being kind of more like platform and device agnostic, right? So we always say Tesla will not make light bulbs and Philips will not make cars. So, you can't have one player just like owning the entire ecosystem. It will just have to be that like, everybody has a nice API that you can kind of connect to. And like what the HEMS does is just like kind of being the management, the brain of that one. But it shouldn't be the case that like, oh, for this to work, you need to have like one brand that owns all of this. So I think also that, these solutions have to be fairly open going forward, because you can't expect the consumer to build their entire home around just one brand. And maybe they can't even do it with just one brand.
Okay. And then actually, Karl, I'll also direct this next question to you. What specific technology, trends, or solutions do you think will become increasingly crucial in the future of home energy management?
I think everybody likes to talk about like AI, and I guess like there will be some area of that kind of like learning your pattern. So like if you think of your iPhone, it kind of learns a bit of like when do you use it, when do you not use it, and you can kind of like adapt a bit on that one. Although we say that like the cheapest price is the cheapest price, right? So like how much AI do you need when you say like, hey, we'll charge you at the cheapest price, and if that's 3 to 5 a.m., then it's 3 to 5 a.m. So I think there's a bit of for sure like AI, as everybody says, but there's also just kind of like you give the consumer the best price. I think the trends that we see as well. I mean, we've already talked about like smart meters a lot. That's obviously kind of one, but I think there's also a bit of like I would like to call it kind of like a consumer education. So before the Industrial Revolution, we did things when the sun was shining, and we sailed when the wind was blowing, and so on. And then we discovered like coal, oil, gas, and we're like, hey, we don't have to. We can sleep. We can keep the lights on whenever we want. And then now, I think a big part of it is for consumers to realize that I could charge my car right now at 9 p.m., but it's better to do it at 3 a.m. instead, right? And just kind of being more cognizant of like when energy is kind of like more abundant. And one thing we just usually say as well is that think of like the average consumers, as Tim mentioned, like experience with like utilities, for example. It's like once a year, right? You're like, oh, I'm moving apartment today. Let me think of my utility. Check for providers and so on. But you're using energy every day, and we really think, for example, that like that should become more of like even like a daily touch point example, right? Like you check the weather today before you step outside the house. Maybe you check your energy provider's app in the morning to see when's a good time to do that, or even if you don't, that it should be done automatically for you.
Ricardo, what about you? Are there any specific technology trends or solutions that you think will become increasingly crucial?
Yeah, I think. Okay, I would like to get another quick step back. I think we follow important trends around, and I think we will touch about some technical challenges or so on. In the market, we see a lot of how at the moment a lot of companies are looking for more collaboration because say they're not they cannot do everything perfect, right? So they can start to focus on certain areas, and we can see a lot of collaboration, right? So that's what we see in terms of technologies, mostly like companies trying to offer and collaborate and offering a compelling solution, but from different players and different technologies manufacturers. In terms of technologies, is I think we all know that the majority of HEM solutions at the moment focus mainly in self-consumption optimization with some more, let's say, advanced technology like the EV charge point because they naturally came a bit more. The connectivity ratios go higher. So, but I think recently we just actually published a bit of a piece of report that we've seen an increasing interest in for example, in heat pumps, and they are a lot of players are either offering already something or they're planning to do that. And with increasing or even regulation uh, suggesting or asking to also deploy more time of use tariffs, so we also see a bit of that more interesting from players to offer optimization time of use tariffs for customers or homeowners, but also integrating more assets. And the one we see more at the moment is increasing interest in heat pumps. Yeah.
Mhm. And then Tim, obviously, I'm going to now turn the question to you. Are there any trends, solutions that you think are going to become more crucial in the future?
Yeah, maybe adding up with a little bit more detail on what Ricardo said. I think the number of use cases, based on regulation or based on market incentives, I think that will dramatically grow very fast as well, because with more and more mass market movement, so millions of assets, as said, the relevance is getting higher and higher, and the pressure is getting higher and higher for the power grids to solve issues, to solve congestions, for example. And that means HEMS must be capable in the certain countries, in the certain areas, to be able not only to connect the assets and steer the assets, but also do that compliant to the regulation, right? And then also do that in parallel. So Ricardo mentioned self-sufficiency. That's one of the basic use cases for sure. Dynamic tariffs, mainly based on day-ahead optimization, so hourly prices. That's the next one. So it's evolving in certain countries. It's already mass market. But then the whole dynamic pricing on the grid side in parallel, and event-based grid controls, and then frequency reserve control things. I mean, that's all coming in the different countries, as said, in a different order, but it's all coming, and the HEMS needs to be able to take that asset complexity away and to steer the assets in the most beneficial way. And I think that's definitely a major trend you're going to see in HEMS systems.
Okay. Well, that actually brings us to the end of this panel. So thank you to Tim here in the studio, Ricardo and Karl remote. Thanks for joining me for this panel. And for our viewers, we'll see you for the next panel in just a few minutes.
Thanks a lot, Georgia.
Thank you.
Karl, Ricardo,
Thank you.
ciao. Take care.
Ciao.